It was the evening of December 24th, 2015. Wichita, Kansas lay quiet under a thick layer of snow. Christmas lights blinked across porches, warm windows glowed from inside modest homes, and the air smelled like cinnamon and firewood. But for Rachel, none of that mattered. She stood outside St. Mark's Baptist Church, the cold biting through her coat like it wasn't even there. Snowflakes landed softly on her long brown hair. Her hands trembled, not from the cold, but from the shame. Rachel weighed over 320 pounds. She had been big most of her life. Grew up being the chubby girl from East Wichita. The nice one, people would say, always with a smile that tried to hide pity. But over time, that pity turned into disgust, especially from the people who should have loved her most. Her husband, Mark, was handsome, lean, and mean in ways that didn't leave bruises but left scars. He never hit her, but he joked, constantly. "You ever think about walking to burn some calories?" He'd laugh during dinner. Or worse, "Don't wear that, Rach. It makes you look like a busted sofa." His family wasn't better. On Thanksgiving, his mother once whispered loud enough for everyone to hear, if she ate less and prayed more, maybe she wouldn't look like that. Rachel didn't fight back. Not because she was weak, but because she believed love meant endurance. That if she showed enough loyalty, enough patience, it would eventually earn her respect. But that Christmas Eve shattered everything. Mark had told her they'd meet at church, said he'd pick her up around 6. Rachel waited on the snowy steps in her best coat. It didn't fit quite right, but she'd done her makeup, curled her hair, and wrapped a small gift in gold paper, a Bible with his name engraved. 6 o'clock passed, then 6:15, then 6:45. By 7, the choir had already started singing inside. People she grew up with walked past her, avoiding eye contact. She sat alone on the frozen concrete, heart pounding. She dialed his number. No answer. She texted. No reply. It was nearly 8 when she finally opened her phone and saw it. A selfie Mark had posted to Facebook. He was at a sports bar downtown, smiling, surrounded by friends. A drink in one hand, a woman in a red dress on the other. The caption read, "Merry Christmas to real joy. Some weights are meant to be dropped." Rachel dropped her phone. Her chest burned like fire, a pain so deep it felt like her lungs were caving in. She wasn't just humiliated, she was erased, replaced, made into a joke. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but she didn't sob. Not then, not yet. Instead, she stood up. Her knees ached from the cold. Her fingers were numb. But she walked. Slowly, deliberately, through the quiet streets of Wichita, past lit-up houses, past carolers, past the bakery that once gave her free cookies as a kid. Every step felt like something inside her was dying. And maybe it was. By the time she reached home, the gold-wrapped Bible was soaked in melted snow. She sat on the edge of their bed, still untouched. Mark never came home that night. Rachel stared into the mirror. Her reflection was swollen, red-eyed, broken. And then, in a voice that barely sounded like hers, she whispered, "No more." That was the night Rachel stopped praying for love from people who only gave her pain. That was the night she stopped begging for value in someone else's story. It was the night she decided to write her own. And it began not with revenge, but with health. With rediscovering her own worth. With tearing down every lie they built around her and starting fresh. She didn't know how yet. She had no plan, no trainer, no money, no roadmap to weight loss, prosperity, or emotional healing. But she had something she'd forgotten she had. Choice. And that was the most powerful thing of all. The morning of December 25th, 2015, arrived in silence. Rachel didn't open gifts. There weren't any. She didn't turn on the TV for background cheer, and she didn't answer her phone, even though her sister left 3 voicemails asking if she was okay. The air in the house felt like it weighed more than she did. Mark's boots were still by the front door. His cologne lingered faintly in the hallway. But he was gone. And for once, she wasn't crying. Rachel stood in front of the mirror again. The same one she had stared into the night before, when her world collapsed. But this time, she looked deeper. Past the puffy face. Past the belly that hung over her pajama pants. Past the shame. What she saw wasn't pretty, but it was real. And real was better than pretending. She pulled out a notebook from the kitchen drawer, the kind she used to write grocery lists on. Today, she wrote 3 words across the first page. I choose me. Rachel didn't have money for fancy solutions. No personal trainer, no online program, no gym membership. But she had time, she had desperation, and she had the need to find her own version of prosperity, starting with her health. The next day, she went to Dillon's, the local grocery store on East Harry Street. The parking lot was half frozen, and she nearly slipped getting out of the car. Her coat didn't zip all the way, and a teenage boy near the carts laughed and nudged his friend when he saw her. Look, bro, it's like a walking marshmallow, he said, loud enough for her to hear. Rachel said nothing. She didn't look back. Not this time. Inside, the store was quiet. Fluorescent lights hummed above as she pushed the cart, each aisle reminding her of the years she had used food to soothe every wound. Ice cream, cinnamon rolls, mac and cheese, frozen pizza, her comfort blanket made of carbs and fat. But this time she stopped. She looked at a bag of chips, then put it back. Instead, she picked up eggs, spinach, chicken breast, bottled water. She didn't know the science. She didn't have a meal plan. But deep down, she understood one simple thing. If I eat the way I've always eaten, I'll stay the way I've always been. In the checkout line, she saw a woman from church. Linda. Older. Well-dressed. Looked like someone who had wealth and values passed down for generations. Rachel? The woman said, blinking with surprise. Where's Mark? Rachel's voice didn't tremble. Gone. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Her tone was awkward. Pity, maybe. Or curiosity. Rachel just nodded and said, not as sorry as I used to be. Back at home, she cleaned out the fridge, dumped 3 trash bags of junk food into the bin. She didn't cry when she tossed out the frozen cheesecake or the soda bottles. She cooked her first real meal in years, scrambled eggs with spinach and salt. Simple, clean, warm. That night, she went to bed. Hungry. Not starving. Just hungry. The kind of hungry that felt like something new was being born. Over the next week, Rachel walked every morning, bundled up in oversized hoodies and scarves. Her knees screamed, her back hurt, but she kept moving. Neighbors stared. Some waved. Some didn't recognize her. By January 10th, she'd lost 5 pounds. It didn't show, but she felt it. In the way her jeans buttoned without fighting her belly. In the way she woke up with a little more air in her lungs. She watched free YouTube videos about food. She read blogs about emotional eating. She journaled about the nights she used to cry into cookie dough, hoping it would fill the silence. One day at the store, she ran into the same teenage boy who mocked her weeks before. This time he looked at her differently. Maybe it was the way she held her head. Maybe it was the cart full of green vegetables instead of sugar. He didn't say anything. And that silence? That was the first victory. Rachel wasn't chasing thinness. She was chasing power, peace, health, values, a kind of quiet wealth that no one could mock because it lived inside her, and though she didn't say it out loud, she was beginning to believe it. One step at a time. By the third week of January, the snow in Wichita started to melt, leaving behind slushy sidewalks and muddy lawns. Rachel had now been walking every day for 20 straight mornings. Not far, not fast, but farther and faster than she had before. Her legs still ached, her breath still got short, but the pain was different now. It wasn't punishment, it was proof. One morning, around 7:15, she passed by the same block where a group of high school boys used to hang out before the bus came. They noticed her. She noticed them. But none of them laughed this time. Rachel kept walking. At home, she downloaded a free workout app on her old phone. Nothing fancy, just basic home movements. Squats using a chair, push-ups against the wall. The kind of workouts made for people who were starting from zero. And she was. Her starting weight had been over 320 pounds. Now she was down to 305. 15 pounds. A sack of dog food, gone. Not water weight, not a trick. Real, earned weight loss. But even more than pounds, Rachel felt the shift inside her. She was sleeping better, waking up clearer. The brain fog that had followed her for years like a shadow began to lift. Her skin looked brighter. Her clothes didn't cling the same way. Her rings slid on easier. She didn't tell many people. Only her sister, Diana, who lived 2 states over and had always been kind. "Rach, I'm proud of you," Diana said on the phone one night. "But more than the weight, I'm proud you finally chose you." Rachel smiled. "It's about time, huh?" They laughed, and it felt good, honest. Still, there were hard days. One afternoon, Rachel ran into Mark's cousin at a gas station. The woman looked her up and down and said, "Well, I guess heartbreak really is the best diet." Rachel paused. She wanted to lash out, but she didn't. Instead, she said, "Actually, it's called self-respect. Maybe you've heard of it." And walked away. Back home, she wrote those words down in her notebook. Self-respect. A value that didn't show up on a scale or in a mirror, but she felt it stronger every day. She also started watching finance videos at night. At first, just out of curiosity. But soon, she began to understand how she'd been giving away her energy, not just in her body, but in her bank account too. She had let Mark handle all the money, all the decisions. Now she opened her own account. She wrote down a budget. She began learning what wealth meant outside of just cash. Security, freedom, power. Little by little, she was rebuilding her foundation. Rachel even applied for a part-time job at a local bookstore downtown. Nothing big, just a few hours a week. But it gave her something more than income. It gave her identity. The owner, a woman named Carol, hired her on the spot after a 10-minute chat. "You're warm. You're real. We need more people like that around here," Carol said, handing her the job schedule. Rachel left with her heart full. That night, she sat on her front porch with a cup of herbal tea wrapped in her favorite blanket and let herself exhale. Not everything was fixed. Not yet. Her body still carried over 300 pounds. Her heart still had bruises. But for the first time in years, Rachel felt in control of her life. She had values she could stand on. A vision for prosperity she was building with her own 2 hands, and a quiet sense of wealth that didn't need to be loud to be real. She didn't know it yet, but her next steps would shake everything, because the world around her was about to notice her rise. When you're ready, I'll move forward with Chapter 4. Just say the word. By mid-February, Wichita was thawing out. The ice had melted into puddles on the sidewalks, and Rachel was no longer bundling up in oversized coats. She had dropped just over 25 pounds by then, but it felt like so much more. Every morning she pulled her hair back, tied up her shoes, and walked. She didn't need loud music or motivation videos anymore. Her own breathing, the rhythm of her footsteps, the sound of birds waking up, that was enough. The scale said she was still close to 295 pounds. But her spirit? It was light. For the first time since her wedding day, Rachel actually liked the woman in the mirror. She still worked at the little bookstore 3 afternoons a week. Carol had given her a raise, and Rachel used that money carefully. She paid off a credit card that Mark had maxed out in her name. She bought herself new shoes. Not expensive ones, but they fit. They felt good. The customers at the store started to notice her too. "Hey, you're glowing," one woman said while buying a novel. "New haircut?" Rachel smiled. "Nope, just new habits." One evening, around 6:30, Rachel was walking out of the store when she heard a voice behind her. "Rachel?" She turned. It was Pastor Glenn, from her old church, the same church she had been abandoned outside of 2 months earlier. "I heard you've been keeping to yourself," he said gently, hands in his coat pockets. Rachel nodded. "Just taking care of my health, my peace." He looked her over, not in a judgmental way, but like he was trying to understand what had changed. "You look strong." "I am," she replied. He hesitated. "You know, Mark's been back around. He asked me if I'd heard from you." Rachel's jaw tightened. "I haven't," she said, "and I'm not sure I want to." That night, she journaled longer than usual, wrote down all the reasons she was rising, not just the weight loss, but the deeper victories, rebuilding her self-worth, learning new values, understanding that her life didn't need to be measured by a man's attention. By early March, she had lost 37 pounds. Strangers didn't recognize her at first. Even the cashier at Dillon's asked, "Wait, are you the lady who used to come in with that red cart?" Rachel laughed. "I still do, just with a different version of me pushing it." One day, she passed by her old church again. She didn't plan to stop, but her feet slowed. She looked at the steps where she'd once waited in the snow, heartbroken and alone. That memory wasn't gone, but it didn't sting the same way. She stood there for a minute, letting the cold wind brush her cheeks. Then she whispered, "Thank you." Not to Mark, to herself. "Thank you for not giving up." Later that week, she went to a small support group for women rebuilding after divorce and emotional abuse. It wasn't therapy, not officially, just folding chairs, bad coffee, and real stories. She shared hers. No one laughed, no one judged. They nodded. They wept. One woman asked, "How'd you even begin?" Rachel said, "I chose to stop feeding the pain and start feeding my health." Another woman hugged her afterward and said, "You've got wealth, girl. Not the kind you can deposit, but the kind you carry." Rachel smiled, because that word, wealth, finally meant something to her. Not riches, not status, but freedom. She was still over 280 pounds, but the woman inside her was brand new. And the world, it was just beginning to notice. By late March, the wind in Wichita had softened. The heavy winter jackets were back in closets, and spring was settling in. Slow, quiet, and kind. Rachel's morning walks had turned into light jogs, her old tennis shoes barely holding together. She had dropped 48 pounds since Christmas. Her face looked different now. Her jawline started to show, her cheeks less round, her eyes brighter. But it wasn't just the physical change people noticed. It was the way she walked into a room, with her head high, with presence. At the bookstore, Carol kept saying, "You've got this glow, girl, like you found something people spend their whole lives looking for." "I think I found me," Rachel answered one day, smiling softly. That same week, she bought her first pair of jeans in years that didn't come from the plus-size clearance rack. They were still size 22, but they zipped up without a struggle. That night, she cried. Not because they were tight, but because she could finally see how far she'd come. Then came the text. It was a Thursday afternoon around 4 o'clock. Rachel had just gotten home from work when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. No name. Just 5 words. You around? Can we talk? Her stomach turned. She didn't need to ask who it was. Mark. She hadn't heard from him in over 3 months. Not since he vanished on Christmas Eve, leaving her in the cold like discarded trash. Rachel stared at the screen for a long time. Then, she set the phone down and went for a walk. The streets were blooming with cherry blossoms. She passed the same church steps where her heart had shattered. She kept moving. The next morning, she replied, I don't owe you anything, but if you need to say something, speak. I'm not meeting in person. Mark texted back almost instantly. I'm sorry, I was a coward. I see what you're doing. Everyone's talking. You look amazing. I messed up. Rachel didn't reply. Not yet. 2 days later, Pastor Glenn saw her at a small community event at the rec center. He's been coming back to church, the pastor said gently. Told me he regrets everything. Rachel shrugged. Regret's cheap. Change has value. And that was the truth. Rachel had spent too many years begging for love that came with conditions. She now understood her worth was never meant to be discounted. That weekend, she finally opened her journal again. She wrote, Forgiveness isn't a favor, it's freedom. But freedom doesn't mean access. Rachel didn't want revenge. She wanted peace, prosperity. She wanted health that lasted longer than a season, wealth that couldn't be stolen, values that guided her even when the world felt heavy. By early April, she had crossed the 60-pound mark. She was down to 261 pounds. Her skin was clearer, her energy higher. She had even started cooking again, finding joy in clean meals filled with color and flavor. One morning, she saw Mark standing across from the church, just standing there, holding something in his hand, waiting. He didn't approach. He didn't call out. He just stood there, eyes searching. Rachel walked past without slowing down. She had already given him her silence. Now she gave him her back. Not out of hate, but out of strength. Let me know when to continue with Chapter 6. It only gets more powerful from here. By the time May rolled in, Wichita was warm, bright, and buzzing with life. The air smelled like cut grass and barbecues. Rachel had lost 72 pounds. She now weighed 248 pounds, and it showed. Her face had angles again. Her arms were firmer. Her waist had returned, not just in inches, but in confidence. She stood straighter, walked with rhythm. Even her eyes sparkled differently. At the bookstore, customers started asking if she was new. I've worked here 5 months, Rachel would say with a small grin. You must have changed something. She'd nod. Just about everything. Rachel wasn't chasing skinny. She was chasing health, and she was running toward it like her life depended on it. Because in a way, it did. No more binge nights, no more emotional eating, no more pretending her value depended on anyone else's approval. Carol, her boss, gave her more hours. Then came a quiet offer. You ever thought about managing this place? Carol asked one afternoon as they were closing up. Rachel blinked. Me? You're sharp. Customers love you. You've got heart. And you're steady. You show up. That's rare. Rachel's throat tightened. She hadn't heard real praise in so long. She forgot how it felt to be seen. She accepted. It wasn't just a promotion. It was validation. A sign that prosperity wasn't some distant dream. It was something she was building, one smart choice at a time. Later that week, she opened a savings account. Just $50 to start. But it was hers. Her money. Earned, saved, protected. Mark hadn't texted again, but word got around fast in a town like Wichita. People saw Rachel at the grocery store, the park, the bank. Whispers started. "That's Rachel? Mark's Rachel. No way, she looks amazing." But the most shocking moment came on a Sunday afternoon in late May. Rachel was sitting alone at a little cafe near downtown, sipping iced tea and reading a book about nutrition and hormone health, one of her new interests, when someone approached. It was Lisa, Mark's younger sister, the one who used to smirk at her at family gatherings, always showing up in designer jeans and expensive perfume, acting like Rachel wasn't good enough to be part of their family. Lisa stood awkwardly by her table. "Hey, Rachel," she said, her voice soft. "Wow, you look, like, incredible." Rachel closed her book and looked up calmly. "Thanks." There was silence. Then Lisa sat down without being invited. "I just wanted to say, I'm sorry for the way I treated you. For the stuff I said. I didn't know." Rachel's jaw tensed. "Didn't know what?" Lisa fidgeted. "Didn't know how strong you were. I guess I judged you by your weight, and now everyone's talking. You're like this different person." Rachel took a slow breath. "I'm the same person. You just never looked deep enough to see it." Lisa nodded. "Mark's been a mess. He keeps saying he made the biggest mistake of his life." Rachel's heart didn't flutter. It didn't ache. She just sipped her tea and said, "Some mistakes are meant to teach, not to fix." That night, Rachel sat on her porch and watched the sun go down. She was no longer chasing revenge. She was living in peace, in wealth that had nothing to do with status or stuff, and everything to do with self-worth and growth. She journaled, "I lost weight, but I gained freedom. I gained clarity. I gained a future." And Wichita? Wichita had taken notice. Because the woman they once pitied had become the woman they couldn't ignore. She was the walking proof of what values, resilience, and health could build. And the man who walked away? Well, he was about to see just how far she'd come. Let me know when to continue with Chapter 7. The turn is coming. It was the second Sunday of June, 2016. The sun hung high over Wichita, casting golden heat across the quiet streets. Church bells echoed through the morning, and the scent of fresh-cut grass floated in the air. Rachel had lost 97 pounds. She now weighed 225 pounds. But more than that, she carried herself like a woman who had left the old version of her in the rearview mirror. Her clothes were fitted, her shoulders were back, her voice steady. She had come a long way from the woman left crying on the church steps. That morning, she wore a simple navy blue dress. It hugged her curves but didn't shout. Her hair was pulled back in a clean, effortless bun. She had on light makeup, a thin gold necklace, and flats. And she walked into St. Mark's Baptist Church like it was the most natural thing in the world. Heads turned. Some stared, some whispered, a few smiled with surprise. She hadn't stepped foot inside that sanctuary since Christmas Eve. The same night her husband, ex-husband now, had humiliated her in silence. She sat 3 rows from the front, not in the back like before, not hidden. The choir sang. The sermon was about redemption, about values and the power of letting go. When the service ended, Rachel stood and made her way toward the exit with quiet confidence. But just before she reached the doors, she heard her name. "Rachel?" She turned slowly. There he was, Mark. Same dark eyes, same jawline, but somehow smaller, like time had shrunk him, like regret had worn down his edges. He was holding a single white rose. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "Mark." He cleared his throat. I saw you come in. I wasn't sure if I should say something." "You already did," she said calmly, "when you left me sitting in the cold." He looked down. "I don't expect forgiveness." "I'm not offering it," she said without cruelty, just clarity. He looked at her again. Really looked, and his voice cracked. You look like everything I always hoped you'd become." Rachel smiled, a little sad, a little strong. "And you look like someone who never saw what was already there." He reached into his pocket, pulled out an envelope. "I wanted to give you this," he said. "It's just a letter, and some money. I owe you more than I can say." She took it. Not because she needed it, but because closure was also a kind of wealth. He added, "I miss you, Rach. I miss what we had." Rachel tilted her head. "You don't miss me. You miss control. And now that I have prosperity, real peace, you want to be part of it." Mark's shoulders slumped. She stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I built this life without you. With pain, yes, but with purpose. I've learned that my health, physical, emotional, spiritual, is worth protecting." He blinked fast. "Is there someone else?" She smiled gently. "There's me, and that's enough for now." And then, just like that, she walked past him, out into the sunshine, into her car, windows down, music playing, heart wide open. Later that afternoon, she opened the envelope. Inside was a check for $500 and a short letter. Apologies, regrets, promises to be a better man. A line at the bottom read, "You deserved better. I just didn't know how to give it." She folded it, tucked it into a drawer, and went back to her journal. That night she wrote, "Closure doesn't need a door slammed. Sometimes it's just walking through it without looking back." Rachel had become her own home, her own anchor, her own love story. And though Mark had finally come knocking, she had already moved on. When you're ready, Chapter 8 will bring it all home. Just say the word. It was the 4th of July. Fireworks popped in the sky above Wichita, painting the clouds in bursts of red, white, and gold. People gathered on porches, blankets spread across parks, kids ran with sparklers in their hands. The air smelled like grilled hot dogs and cut watermelon. Rachel stood on the hill just behind the rec center, where she now led a free Saturday morning health walk for women in the neighborhood. She wore black leggings, a gray tank top, and running shoes she bought herself after reaching her 100-pound milestone. She now weighed 201 pounds. From her highest point of 323 pounds to now, she had lost 122 pounds. But what she'd gained, that was the story. Confidence, energy, a community, a steady income, health, and most of all, a deep, unshakable sense of self-worth that no one could take from her again. Beside her was Diana, her sister, visiting from Oklahoma. They hadn't spent a 4th together in years. "Look at you," Diana said, nudging her. "You're the one everyone's looking at now." Rachel laughed. "Because I brought the snacks." "No," Diana said. "Because you're the glow. You're the one people follow now." Rachel smiled, eyes watching the fireworks. Funny what happens when you stop begging to be seen and start seeing yourself. That morning, she'd received a letter from a local wellness group. They'd seen her Instagram account, small but growing, and wanted to feature her in a campaign about real people overcoming real battles. They weren't offering her fame or fortune, but they were offering her something that mattered more. Voice. Rachel agreed, with one condition. "I don't want to be the before and after girl. I want to talk about values, about resilience, about what real prosperity looks like. Not skinny, Not rich, just whole. They agreed, and so her story would be told, not in glossy headlines, but in community centers, schools, and small churches, places where women like her were still fighting in silence. That evening, after the fireworks ended, she drove home, parking outside the same little house where her pain once lived. Only now, it felt like home. Mark never tried to contact her again after that day outside the church. She later heard he'd moved to Missouri. Someone said he'd lost his job. Others said he was in therapy. Rachel wished him peace, but from a distance, because some wounds don't need reopening, and some apologies come too late. Inside, her journal lay open on the kitchen table. She sat down and wrote, "My name is Rachel. I was born in Wichita. I was told I was too big to be loved, too much to be wanted. But I found out they were wrong. I was never too much. I was too powerful for small hearts." She closed the journal and stood in the kitchen, barefoot, free, 122 pounds lighter. But what she'd shed couldn't be weighed. She had shed shame. She had shed silence. She had shed everything that didn't belong to the woman she was always meant to become. And for the first time in her life, Rachel was not just surviving, she was living and thriving and leading and smiling, not for anyone else, just for her and you, listening right now. Have you ever felt like Rachel? Have you ever been counted out, then rose anyway? Tell me below. I want to hear your story, because someone out there is waiting to see your rise too.